What's up, guys? I'm Chris, also known as Ghost, and I am here to talk to you guys today about my snare sound I made for One Synth Challenge number 93, which sounds something like this. Okay, so right off the bat here, the snare is often the thing in these One Synth challenges that I actually, I actually spend a lot of time doing, and it takes me a long time. But I really kind of enjoy it too, so it's not like a big deal. But I just want to let you know that this is actually the thing I find to be one of the most challenging sound design elements when you're using a synth is trying to get a good sounding snare for whatever genre you're working in. And for drum and bass, especially when most drums are sampled and layered, it is even more of a challenge, in my opinion, for me at least. I find it kind of challenging and it's fun, but yeah. So just like if you watch my last video, which is about the kick drum, the snare is very much the same. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off all these master effects on the snare bus, and I'm going to I'm just going to focus on each element by itself. So the first thing I did was I created this little sound. I'm going to turn the volume up on the channel. So this is just like I did for the kick. I'm using basically none of the additional oscillators enabled, and I have the filter envelope turned all the way up. I'm applying as much of it as I can. And you can see I've got some of the volume envelope working there too. And all this sound is really doing is creating kind of a 200 hertz fundamental, which is going to kind of set the body of the drum, the kind of the resonant frequency of the snare drum. Since it's smaller, it obviously is at a lower frequency. The kick's more like 80 or 100, I think, and this one is 200. I just studied a lot of tracks, and I've noticed that a lot of neurofunk and drum and bass, they always have snares around the 180 to 240-ish kind of hertz, really hammering away. And I just like how it sounds, so I tried to replicate that. The patch is very simple. I'm just using a low-pass filter on it to kind of keep the highs out because I'm going to mix some higher elements in later. Okay, so then there's this sound, the clap. Actually, let me go back and turn this down. I think this was at like -8, maybe? Yeah, fine. Okay, the clap. Turn that up. Okay, so this sound is your typical synth clap. So you make this sound. It's kind of like one of the first things that I learned how to synthesize. Noise oscillator cranked all the way up, and really short loudness envelope. If you turn it up, it kind of sounds more like a splashy thing. But you just get with a bandpass filter, kind of this clap. If I change that to low pass, well, doesn't really change it much. Get more of a hi-hat sound. I'm actually surprised how little difference that makes. Oh well, it sounds cool. So this is kind of taking up the high mids, and it's kind of giving me this kind of synthy clap sound that I'll use to kind of make the snare be a little bit brighter and whatnot. Okay, and the snare noise. Oh, it's turned way down. Oh, I don't think I actually used this sound. Actually, I know what the problem is, and I'll explain it to you later. Okay, so this is kind of the splashiness of the the splashiness of the chains rattling under there, that kind of thing. And again, very simple noise oscillator and bandpass, but I'm not rolling off the top, and you can see that the decay is a little bit longer, release is longer, so I can get kind of that splashy sound. A little bit of filter envelope, but it's not really doing much. I wouldn't think it would, type thing. Okay. So that was turned way down, and we'll talk about why that is in a little bit. Okay. Snare hat. This is basically, you can see even on the EQ, I have the exact same EQ as I did on the kick. It's just that same patch I made on the kick. So if you want to see it, go check out the kick video of the hat. And that's just giving a little bit more attack to the snare. And then this sound, which I called snap. Again, if you watch the kick video, this is the same sound that's just tweaked a tiny bit using my ear for the snare. And again, that's just giving a little bit more of this high frequency kind of pitch bending that you, again, just kind of combine all these sounds kind of work to make it sound like a pretty cool snare. All right, so those are the main sounds. And I know I'm going through this rocket speed, but by now you guys probably realize that my synth patches are really basic. And I get a lot of the sound by using effects and limiting them out, stuff like that. I'm just trimming the peaks on that sound. And that's kind of how I like to go about it. It's just creating lots of layers of sound and then compressing them together. Except for this final sound. I actually think this, what I called Snare Metal, is kind of interesting. All right, so it's at -31. Crank it up. So what is that? Okay. This is what I thought. So I wanted kind of a metallic sound. I wanted for this track, I made all those other sounds, and I was kind of like, there's something missing out of the snare, and I wanted more of this industrial sounding kind of snare drum. And so I wanted a metallic sound. And I will say, I think I even called it metallic because neuro. And I think I went back to what I did for OSC 91. I had a very similar kind of metallic drum sound, and with the Yuhi synth, I can't remember what it was called. It's one of the free ones from Yuhi, but anyways, and I kind of tried to replicate that sound. And to be honest with you, I spent a long time trying to figure out how to make this sound. And then I realized I think there's actually one in the preset library that's pretty close to this. So anyways, probably should have checked. But oh well, it was fun. I'm kind of getting it by doing a little bit of frequency modulation. So you can see the two frequency knobs are a little bit different if I change it. Kind of gives you this different frequencies or timbres you can even see in the spectrum. With these two different pulse waves. And probably if I could find a manual for this synth, I'd probably talk about that. But these two knobs are the ones that I was having a really hard time figuring out. Once I understood what they kind of did and how they were playing off each other with these pulse waves, I kind of got the sound I was after. Of course, I've got a volume envelope. Kind of that 909 cowbell or 808, whatever. It's kind of where it was. And then again, just like always, mess with your envelopes until you get the shape of the sound that you like. And like I said, I think if you're following along, there's one in the preset library if you want to go check it out. On this sound, the effects are doing a lot. So if I turn off all the effects, it's kind of muted, turn them on. Yeah, kind of getting more of a nice metallic sound. The channel EQ is doing a lot on the high end. If I turn that off, it's kind of dull. It needed to sound a little more like hitting a piece of metal to me. And the reason that sounds so important is because I actually did my entire mix down around this one layer of the snare, this thing called metal. And whenever I was mixing in new parts, the bass, some of the effects, the pads, things like that, I always made sure that for the most part I could hear that metallic sound on the snare. So that is the element that I based almost the entire mix down on, and I wanted the kick and the snare and all the things to be kind of loud and sound punchy, but I didn't want to lose track of that subtlety of the metal. So I think I was at -31. So barely audible. Okay, so let's talk about how to get these sounds to sound like a drum. On their own, they're not really that awesome, but what I find is that I like to mix into this snare bus. So I've got a classic VCA emulation of the compressor. I'm going to just let this thing play. Sorry, just the snare. It's soft now. It's going to get louder. So what this compressor's doing is with it off and with it on, because it's got a little bit of a attack setting, even though this compressor doesn't have a knob for it, this version of it, you can tell it's getting a little more attacky. It's kind of compressing the tail a little bit, giving the thing a little more attack. You might even argue it's too much. I'm going to go back down. Then, of course, the overdrive. And that's doing a lot of the work to really kind of warm the sound up and glue all those parts together. And then the channel EQ is just taking out the low so it doesn't interfere with the kick. And then the W1, which I have whacked that thing all the way down. And so check this out. You hear that? It totally changed the entire sound of the snare. So this is with it on, and then off. Can't even hear the metal sound or the noise. Okay, so interesting, right? So what's going on there is, remember this snare noise sound? Oh, that's not going to work. Well, with the W1 off, you can't even hear the noise. Maybe a tiny, but with it on, because the limiter is just totally crushing that sound, it's bringing the whole volume of the sound way up. It's kind of like, and that's kind of how, at least in my experimentation, how you get these kind of big electronic-y snare drum sounds. I think it sounds wicked, and I like it. But you know, it's probably technically totally wrong to use a limiter in that way. But like I said, that free W1 limiter, this guy is just a freaking awesome plugin for sound design. I absolutely love it. Okay, that's sounding pretty cool. Then I follow it with, yes, another limiter. And that's loud, sorry. So without it, with it. And just like the snare, I have massive amounts of gain reduction going on. By having these two limiters in series, I'm kind of using the first one to kind of squash everything together and kind of push it into one sound. And then the second limiter, I'm using just to kind of bring the volume of that whole thing back up. And you can see the waveform. Without it, it's got the fish bones. And with it, it's really bringing up the release and kind of bricking up the attack. So it just makes the snare have just a lot of beef or a lot of weight. And for a tune like this, the snare, for me, needs to be just rocking. Now, having a second listen to this, if I was going to do this track again, I'd probably make it less attacky. It's got a lot of that high-end attack. Even looking at the spectrum, it's kind of a little bit over the top. But hey, it's a One Synth challenge. For me, this sounded pretty good. Okay, finally, the last thing here is I'm routing all this to bus 20. And bus 20 is, I've got an EQ that's high-pass filtering it. And I have a Space Designer, which is just a reverb plugin in Logic. It's called Dynamic Hall. So I'm going to play the snare without the reverb. Now with the reverb. It's just giving that tail a little more splash, like it's kind of in a room. And you'll notice I didn't use any reverb on the kick. But for the snare, I wanted it to sit in the mix a little bit more, not be as much in your face, but still loud. I find that this EQ on the reverb is really important. If I turn it off, it kind of sounds like you're hitting the snare in like a concert hall or something, and it just loses a lot of that weight around 200. But with it on, you're just kind of getting that high, like whoosh, kind of that, I don't even know how to explain it. Just to me, it sounds better, and you still get the weight and the punch of the lower end of the kick, or I'm sorry, the snare. So In any case, that pretty much covers how I did the snares. And I think next time I'm going to quickly talk about the perk effects, and then we'll wrap up with the drum bus processing as a group and call it good on the drums. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Talk to you later.